The Christmas season is here, and with that comes a lot of long-standing Christmas myths. We'll take a look at some of those, also questions on humans dealing with people of different beliefs, as well as specific satanic ritual protocol and why it's there.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain, Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. A couple of quick announcements. My other podcast, The Devil's Mischief, is still going. We're still celebrating 20 years with a look back at selected episodes from those past 20 years. You can go to radiofreesatan.com or devilsmischief.com to learn more. I was also a guest a few weeks back on a podcast called The Devil's Salon. That was really enjoyable. If you look up The Devil's Salon, S-A-L-O-N, on wherever most podcasts are played, you should be able to find it, or you can just go to satansplain.com and scroll down on the main page. You should be able to find links for the episode I did there. And finally, I got invited back to Reaper's Underground for, I think, what will be a Christmas episode of sorts. We'll see. I'm not sure when exactly that will be, but I will be posting the info as it comes. Which brings us to today's topic. Christmas. Why should I be talking about Christmas at all on a Satanism show? I mean, isn't Christ the opposite of Satan, and therefore as a Satanist I should hate Christmas? No, that's kind of dumb. I already talked about this about a year ago in Satansplain. What is the satanic view on Christmas? Well, it's so simple I'm almost embarrassed to repeat it. So let's make this quick. Can you be a Satanist and celebrate Christmas? Well, it depends on what that means. Can you be a Satanist and believe in the baby Jesus of Nazareth and the miracle of a virgin birth of some divine son of God to save mankind and blah, blah, blah? No, obviously not, because Satanism is a non-theistic religion, and more specifically, one that has no concept of an external savior for oneself, let alone the need of one for the whole human species. As we say in the Satanic Bible, say unto thine own heart, I am my own Redeemer. Now, having said that, the reality is that regardless of the alleged origins of this holiday known as Christmas, Christmas is not a completely religious holiday. It has long become a cultural one, and most of the ways it gets celebrated are quite secular in its manifestation. If you are a Satanist, and you just want to put up a Christmas tree and exchange wrapped gifts in wrapping paper and eat candy canes and drink eggnog and listen to Nat King Cole and Dean Martin and watch Irving Berlin's White Christmas and A Christmas Story and Die Hard, go for it. I do all these things. Have fun. Nobody cares. Conversely, if you are a Satanist who absolutely abhors Christmas, not just because of the religious aspect, but because you just, I don't know, you hate giving gifts, you hate Christmas music, you hate the stores being closed for 2 extra days, or maybe you just hate the color combination of red and green. I don't know. In any case, that's fine too. Don't celebrate it if that's what you choose to do. Or if you're a Satanist somewhere in between those two extremes, or you're just completely indifferent to the holiday of Christmas, that's all fine too. Those are all options. As a Satanist, I care about your personal Christmas celebrations about as much as I care about your personal favorite food choices. Okay, I'm sure I've more than made my point, so let's move on. Why would I have more to say about the topic of Christmas today? Well, once in a while on Satansplain, I do like to comment on some things recently going on in the world. And right now, as I record this, it is December, which means it is the Christmas season. You may have also noticed that, you may have noticed on this show that I generally indulge in condescendingly explaining things. So, with that, I would now like to present to you some common misconceptions about Christmas. I hear a lot of complaints every year concerning Christmas. I'm not just talking about complaints from the people who aren't Christians, but complaints from the people who are Christians. And sometimes it's both. I'll hear, "Oh, Christmas used to mean something when I was a child, but now it's all about commercialism. It was never like that when I was a kid. And atheists shouldn't be celebrating Christmas because it's a Christian holiday. It's our holiday. And I see people who spell Christmas with an X, and they do that because they are trying to take Christ out of Christmas." All right, well, let's take this last accusation first because it's an easy one. When people spell Christmas as Xmas instead of Christmas, is that to avoid the title of Jesus? Is it an effort to secularize the holiday? Is that the reason why this abbreviation was invented? The answer is no. In fact, Christians who claim this could not be more wrong. Why is Christmas sometimes spelled with an X? Well, I will tell you. The X in this case is actually the Greek letter chi. Chi is the first letter in the Greek word for Christ, which is Christos. The oldest known copies of the New Testament were written in Greek, and G, wouldn't you know, that means the first writings about Jesus Christ were in Greek. The abbreviation of Xmas was invented by Christians. It was done for shorthand, like we use it today. Some monks even used X alone as an abbreviation for Christ. In fact, have you ever seen on some churches, like Catholic churches, you'll see what looks like a letter X imposed on a letter P? Well, it doesn't stand for no parking. Now, the X and the P are actually the Greek letters chi and rho, and they're the first two letters in that same Greek word I mentioned, Christos. So, if anything, you could argue that spelling Christmas with a C, the letter from the Roman alphabet, is further away from the original word for Christ than the X spelling is. In fact, maybe you can point that out the next time you see a Christian bitching about the X spelling. Say, "Hey man, first of all, it was you Christians in the first place who invented the X abbreviation. And second of all, if you love Jesus so much, why are you spelling his name with a C, with the Roman alphabet and not the Greek alphabet? You're just supporting the Romans, the people who crucified him. Way to go, you heathen." All right, now personally, I do often spell Christmas with an X just because it's convenient, shorthand. I don't do it to offend Christians. However, my attitude is, well, if you're a Christian and you're offended by it, then you don't know the history of your own religion, in which case I'm inadvertently kind of glad you took offense to it, you ignorant asshole. Speaking of ignorance, let's get back to this notion that, Christmas was this wholesome thing that was only ever about Jesus and family, and now it's become this commercialized thing. Boo-hoo-hoo. This is just such bullshit. In fact, if you get a chance, do this. Go do a web search. I say web search because not everybody uses Google, so that's why I don't use Google as a verb. Anyway, do a search on your favorite web search engine of choice, and do a search for the words Christmas 1923 store. And then take a look at the images that come up in the search result. You will see some photographs from 100 years ago of storefronts with the commercialized, hyped-up displays of selling toys and decorations for Christmas. Likewise, you can find catalogs from Sears Roebuck, from the early 1900s, even late 1800s, where they have pages and pages of commercialized items for sale for Christmas. How about that beloved classic wholesome Christmas song, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? Well, that was commercialism too. It was written for a department store. You can look this up. Which brings up another point. I see Christians who claim to be, they seem to be under the delusion that Christmas was this completely sacred religious holiday until maybe 2 generations ago. But again, look at decorated trees from 100 years ago. Look at Christmas music. Yeah, there were lots of religious Christmas songs like Silent Night and Joy to the World, but there are a ton of classic secular Christmas songs. I have a 3-disc set of Christmas music from the Ultra Lounge series. That whole Ultra Lounge series was over 30 CDs of big band, exotica, space age pop, mambo, and music like that from the 50s and early 60s. But there was a Christmas Cocktails collection, volumes 1, 2, and 3. 3 discs of Christmas music. Guess how many religious songs are on this entire 3-disc population? 0. They are all secular Christmas songs. But enough about the secular reality of Christmas. Let's get back to this complaint about it being commercialized. Once again, the commercialization of Christmas is nothing new. In fact, when I was a kid growing up in the 1980s, I had to hear the same bullshit from adults of that time. Oh, Christmas is all commercialized now, and we've lost the real meaning of Christmas, which is about giving and not this commercialism. And, I have no doubt that my parents heard the same thing in, the 1950s from their parents and other adults. Who knows? It probably goes back further than that. But I hear this sort of whining every year from older people, whether it's about Christmas or about something else. Oh, when I was a child, the world was just such a better place, and people were nicer, and kids respected adults. No. This is a subjective illusion. And it's mostly because when you were a kid, you didn't see things as a grown-up would. You didn't have the responsibilities of having to go to work and pay bills. You didn't watch the news. You didn't even know what taxes were. Now, that doesn't mean every child had a happy childhood, but again, this idea that Christmas or life in general when you were a kid was more innocent and magical had really nothing to do with the decade when that happened, and just about everything to do with how old you were. All right, what's another popular myth about Christmas? Well, a lot of people believe Santa Claus is not real, and he actually is real. Okay, I'm kind of half joking there. So that claim needs a lot of qualification. I realize that. So Santa Claus is not real. And don't post comments and send me emails saying, oh my God, I really thought he was real until you said it, Bill. All right, the predictable joke. Just don't do that. Anyway, my point is that the man that Santa Claus is based on actually was real. There really was a Saint Nick. There was a man named Saint Nicholas of Myra. He lived around the year 300 CE. He's depicted as having a white beard and was known, I believe, as the patron saint of children who would secretly leave gifts for children. Anyway, I just find that interesting. But this also brings us back to the false notion of Christmas being a strictly Christian holiday, because I'm sure many of you listeners know about the pagan origins of Christmas. I didn't want to make that the main focus of the show, but it seems to be a perfect example to include when we're talking about popular Christmas myths. I will say that some of the explanations of the pagan origins of Christmas you might stumble across online are actually myths themselves. There was this underground film made, I think some 20 years ago, called Zeitgeist, which explored the origins of the Jesus character. And personally, I believe Jesus did not historically exist. Long story short, I think the character was based on a mix of other characters, some real, some fictional. That's what I've concluded after reading a lot on the topic over the years. However, Zeitgeist, in this documentary, if I recall, claims, for example, that Jesus was modeled after the Egyptian god Osiris, and that Osiris was born on December 25th. And some details like that, really don't hold up. So granted, there are plenty of examples of mythology of demigods or gods that go through resurrection, exhibit magical powers, and so on. But Zeitgeist did not really do as good of a job as people kind of thought it did. So to address this whole topic, I've decided to just read you an excerpt from a book that I got back in the 1990s. So back in the 1990s, Charles Panatti wrote a book called Extraordinary Origins of Everyday Things, and he followed that up with a book that focused more specifically on religion history, religion trivia, titled Sacred Origins of Profound Things. So here is some of what he says in one or both of the books. Christmas, founded in the year 337 Common Era, Rome. And by the way, you may have noticed I don't say BC and AD. I use the terms BCE and CE, before Common Era and Common Era. These are not my invention. They were well-established terms, and they're not only used for the fact that not everybody in the world is Christian, but because, as we'll see, the birth time of the alleged Jesus is not very clear. Anyway, back to the book. As a holy day and a holiday, Christmas is an amalgam of the traditions from half a dozen cultures accumulated over centuries: a turkey dinner and a decorated tree, Christmas cards and Santa Claus, Yule logs, mistletoe, bells, and carols originated with different peoples to become integral parts of December 25th, a day on which no one is certain that Jesus Christ was born. The idea to celebrate the Nativity on December 25th was first suggested early in the 4th century, the clever conceit of church fathers wishing to eclipse the December 25th festivities of a rival religion that threatened the existence of Christianity. It is important to note that for 2 centuries after Christ's birth, no one knew and very few people cared exactly when he was born. Yes, you heard that right. The earliest Christians, for a couple of centuries, did not really care about the birth of Jesus in the first place. Continuing on with the excerpt, birthdays were unimportant. Death days are what counted. Christ was viewed as divine, and thus his natural birth was deliberately played down. The church even announced that it was sinful to contemplate observing Christ's birthday, quote, as though he were a king pharaoh. Several renegade theologians, however, attempted to pinpoint the Nativity and came up with a confusion of dates: January 1st, January 6th, March 25th, and May 20th. The latter eventually became a favored date because the Gospel of Luke states that the shepherds who received the announcement of Christ's birth were watching their sheep by night. Shepherds guarded their flocks by day and night only at lambing time in the spring. In the winter, the animals were kept in corrals unwatched. What finally forced the issue and compelled the church to legitimize a December 25th date was the burgeoning popularity of Christianity's major rival religion, Mithraism. On December 25th, pagan Romans, still in the majority, celebrated Natalis Solis Invicti, or the birthday of the invincible sun god Mithras. The cult originated in Persia and rooted itself in the Roman world in the 1st century BCE. By 274 CE, Mithraism was so popular with the masses that the Emperor Aurelian proclaimed it the official state religion. In the early 300s, the cult seriously jeopardized Christianity, and for a time it was unclear which faith would emerge victorious. Church fathers debated their options. It was well known that Roman patricians and plebeians alike enjoyed the festivals of a protracted nature. The tradition was established as far back as 753 BCE, when King Romulus founded the city of Rome on the Palatine Hill. Not only the Roman observance of Natalis Soli Invicti occasioned December feasts and parades, so too did the celebration of the Saturnalia, in honor of Saturn, the god of agriculture. The church needed a December celebration. Thus, to offer converts an occasion in which to be pridefully celebratory, the church officially recognized Christ's birth. And to offer head-on competition to the sun worshippers' feast, the church located the Nativity on December 25th. The mode of observance would be characteristically prayerful, a Mass, in fact, a Christ's Mass. Though centuries later, social scientists would write of the psychological power of group celebrations, the unification of ranks, the solidification of collective identity, the reinforcement of common objectives, the principle had long been intuitively obvious. The celebration of Christmas took permanent hold in the Western world in the year 337, when the Roman Emperor Constantine was baptized, uniting for the first time the emperorship and the church. Christianity became the official state religion, and in the year 354, Bishop Liberius of Rome reiterated the importance of celebrating not only Christ's death but also his birth. And now, Panatti goes on in the book to talk about the origins of some of the other things associated with Christmas. I'll just read you a couple of highlights here. Mistletoe, he points out, was a more ancient custom, but the Christmas tree seemed to show up in the 8th century Germany. Also, quote, "It is not surprising that, like many other festive Christmas customs, the tree was adopted so late in America. To the New England Puritans, Christmas was sacred. The Pilgrims' second governor, William Bradford, wrote that he tried hard to stamp out pagan mockery of the observance, penalizing any frivolity. The influential Oliver Cromwell preached against, quote, the heathen traditions of Christmas carols, decorated trees, and any joyful expression that desecrated that sacred event. In 1659, the General Court of Massachusetts enacted a law making any observance of December 25th, other than a church service, a penal offense. People were fined for hanging decorations. That stern solemnity continued until the 19th century, when the influx of German and Irish immigrants undermined the Puritan legacy. So immigrants are the reason for Christmas decorations. Interesting. Panatti also says of Christmas cards, quote, a relatively recent phenomenon, the sending of commercially printed Christmas cards originated in London in 1843. Previously, people had exchanged handwritten holiday greetings, first in person, then via post. By 1822, homemade Christmas cards had become the bane of the U.S. postal system. That year, the superintendent of mails in Washington, D.C., complained of the need to hire 16 extra mailmen. Fearful of future bottlenecks, he petitioned Congress to limit the exchange of cards by post, concluding, quote, I don't know what we'll do if this keeps on. Well, not only did it keep on, but with the marketing of attractive commercial cards, the postal burden worsened. Christmas finally became a federal holiday in the U.S. in 1870. So the bottom line with all of these examples is that the so-called Christmas tradition that Christians are defending is something I think they're more than welcome to have, but it's also something that hasn't really been around for as long as they would like to think it has. And of course, there are lots of pagan traditions that made its way into it. In fact, there are some Christians who fully acknowledge this and thus reject Christmas. The Jehovah's Witnesses, for example. They are a denomination of Christians, and they know that the date of December 25th, for example, has no biblical basis. They know about the pagan origins of traditions like decorating a tree. Thus, as firm believers of the Bible, the Jehovah's Witnesses do not celebrate Christmas. So when Christians ask me, hey, why is it that you atheists and other non-Christians celebrate Christmas when you don't believe? I say, because it's a holiday whose celebratory traditions have almost nothing to do with your Jesus. The Jehovah's Witnesses, on the other hand, know this, and they reject the holiday as pagan. So what's your excuse? Why aren't you doing the same thing as them? The answer, of course, is because you like the presents, you like all the indulgences, the family traditions, and all that other sort of fun stuff that goes with the holiday, which means other people should be able to enjoy that too. Oh, and finally, one more Christmas myth. I talked about this on a Satansplain episode I did last year in 2022, but as some of you may remember, in 2015, there was a whole controversy about Starbucks having a red cup. The story, as it was reported all over the media, was that Starbucks coffee has a different cup design for the holidays every year. Some years they had a reindeer drawing, some years it was snowflake patterns, and in 2015, they decided to go with an ultra-simple red cup without any other special graphic design to it. But the story, as the news reported it, was that Christians were enraged over this, saying, they decided to take the decorations away because it's a war on Christmas. Which made it a big story because then everybody else said, gee, look at the people complaining about the simplest of things. Christians are so whiny and everything is offensive to everybody these days. The myth, however, is not just the idea of the Starbucks waging a war on Christmas. They just decided that year to go with, again, a really simple cup. Now, the bigger myth, which nobody realized, is that there didn't seem to be any evidence of Christians complaining about the cups in the first place. I think at worst they traced it back to the one blog, if I recall, which may have even been a parody blog, and it got deleted anyway. But alas, the great masses couldn't pass up a good rage bait story. And please don't send me that story from The Onion about Starbucks introducing a new satanic cup with the sigil Baphomet on it. It's an old joke. I've seen that a million times already. I do actually have one of the original Starbucks red cups, though. I bought a coffee in 2015 and saved the cup because it was just so big in the news. I just saved it for my own novelty, my own amusement. Maybe I should put it on my altar for solstice. In fact, let's take a coffee break. You are listening to Satansplain.
You are listening to Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
In 1966, Anton LaVey created the Church of Satan, marking the beginning of the Age of Fire and Year 1 Anno Satanas. In 1969, he published the Satanic Bible, codifying Satanism as a religion, the first time it's been done in human history.
In the name of Satan, ruler of the earth, king of hell, come forth from the pit, bestow the blessings of hell upon us. For we are your children, and we invoke thee this night.
In 2001, I was appointed High Priest of the Church of Satan. In 2007, I published the Satanic Scriptures, further defining and expanding on satanic philosophy and greater magic ritual.
Hail, Satan full of might! Our allegiance is with thee. Cursed are they. The God adorers. And cursed are the worshippers of the Nazarene eunuch.
For the past 50 years, the Church of Satan has stood as the sole organization to define and defend Satanism as a religion. And though pretenders to the infernal throne have come and gone, we have stood the test of time and will into the future. Visit churchofsatan.com for more information and read the Satanic Bible and the Satanic Scriptures. Knowledge is the solution for ignorance. Hail, Satan!
Hail, Satan! Hail, Satan!
Magister Bill M. with Satansplain. Visit the official website for the show, satansplain.com. You can listen to full episodes of the show there. You can also catch Satansplain on Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and other places as well. Please give a like and a follow or whatnot to Satansplain on YouTube, Facebook, and X, the microblogging site formerly known as Twitter. For all questions and correspondence, you can email me. bill@satansplain.com is the email address. Luis writes to us from Spain, and he says, why do you think that people are afraid of different beliefs and preferences? For example, this week, a news article has gone quite viral due to the character of it. A police agent here in my country has interposed a demand against the police department of a city due to them forcing him to say something along the lines of, quote, I serve God who will put me back safely in my home as he had put me in his profession, unquote. Now that the media got it to the public view, the police department cited him to a disciplinary hearing with him, and Luis gives a link here to an article in Spanish, but I read it with an online translator. So the long and short of it is a police officer has to take an oath in order to have, serve that role in that job, and the oath has some nonsense lines about vowing to serve God in some capacity. So Luis goes on. The institution has been kind of polemic as it says God and party on a laic country, but who honestly doesn't feel like it, as in public schools they force you into Catholicism. Andres has been a follower of the COS and LaVey's philosophy, And although it's not something that important, I would like to read and hear in the podcast, if possible, your opinions on this matter. So I wrote back to Luis and said, thanks for bringing this article to my attention. To answer your first question, people have different degrees of conviction in what they believe to be the truth and whatever else is important. And this results in certain moral codes and other rules of behavior. When somebody who is strong in his or her convictions sees somebody else who doesn't share the same view, that may be interpreted as a threat to one's own survival or well-being, really. As I'm sure many Satanists already know, the highest primal drive is that of survival. But this sort of reactionary behavior is not even limited to religious belief. So, for example, there are many vegans, you could say, who believe that eating animal products is inherently evil and unhealthy, and thus when they see other people not abiding by the same dietary rules, they may get angry. Now, thankfully, I know not all vegans are like that, but the ones who are in effect afraid of people not being vegan. And that's because, among other reasons, they feel such actions are sustaining the existence of what they perceive to be the evil meat and dairy industries, for example, a worse life for animals and people alike, and so on. So it's a threat to their own well-being. So I'd say that, like all fears, the fear of different beliefs and preferences ultimately stem from our primal survival drive, which in turn means the person feeling fearful also feels threatened on some level, whether that's rationally justified or not. The question is, how do we live with people with different beliefs? On one extreme, you have many conservatives who are convinced that there is objectively only one set of correct ways of thinking, and that people who disagree are either just evil or misinformed and should be treated as such. On the other extreme, you have many liberals who believe that all beliefs are ultimately subjective and that no one group is necessarily more correct than another. And personally, if you haven't guessed by now, I reject both of these approaches. I'm sure there are some Satanists out there who may be quick to say, well, Bill, you don't have to live with people with different beliefs. Just don't interact with people. People suck. Stay away from them. Okay, but while I do see the satanic virtue in keeping contact with other people to a minimum, the reality is that for just pretty much the rest of us in the real world, we do have to interact with humans, whether we like it or not. Whether it's a neighbor or a store clerk or a car mechanic, a relative, whoever. So my own attitude is keep things on a practical level. Don't bring up the topic of personal beliefs or other touchy subjects if you don't have to. And don't interact with annoying people in real life if you can avoid it. I still maintain, for example, in the workplace, the old rule of don't talk about sex, politics, or religion, because they're touchy subjects and things can get unprofessional pretty fast. Now, as for this particular news case, where a Satanist police officer was seemingly forced to take a Christian oath of sorts, I wouldn't say the way he handled it was definitively right or wrong, but I'll say that some other Satanists may have taken a different approach. So, for example, another Satanist in this position may think, well, they're forcing me to take this silly oath that says I serve God, but it's just meaningless mumbo-jumbo. It's just an expression. It's just a stupid formality, and it's not like I'm going to melt or burst into flames if I say that part of the oath. So let me just say it and get it over with. To that, I would also quickly add the reminder that there's nothing glorious in Satanism about being a martyr. Your own life comes first. Satanism is a tool. It is not a cause. And you are not under some theological obligation to fight crusades for Satanism or for secularism or whatever. But getting back to the situation where a Satanist may have to repeat some oath with a line about God in order to be a policeman or whatever the case is, well, maybe another Satanist in this situation might look at the oath and say, well, this oath says I have to serve God, but it doesn't say which God. I am a Satanist, so I view myself as my own God, because after all, I do serve myself. So technically, I agree that I serve God, so to speak. So I'll go along with the oath. But secretly, I'm not pledging my oath to the Christian God. And of course, there may be other Satanists, like the officer in this article, who feels it's important enough to reject and to fight. But those are just 3 possible ways a Satanist might respond. And there may be more. Maybe you can call in sick for the oath reading formality. I don't know. As for which of these 3 or 4 things is the right answer, it depends on the Satanist. Like I said earlier about Christmas, this is one of those issues where you need to weigh what's subjectively important for yourself. And to be clear, this doesn't mean there are no definitive answers in Satanism or that Satanism can mean anything you want. No. There is some core dogma in Satanism that distinguishes Satanism from non-Satanism. But at the same time, this is not a religion that has instructions on what to do for each and every situation in life. And this actually brings us to our next email. Jay writes, "Greetings. I am a big fan of the Devil's Mischief podcast and Satansplain. I know Satanism is not a religion where you have to be taken by the hand with everything. But having said that, I've read the Satanic Bible, and it explicitly states to avoid gold in ritualization because of its historic use in Judeo-Christian religions. My question is, to what extent is gold counterproductive as it relates to Satanism and ritualization? I enjoy wearing gold jewelry just as much as I enjoy wearing satanic symbols and ritual, but also wanted to avoid any misrepresentations of something I hold so dear and represents who I am. I noticed on the official Satan Me website they do not have any gold chains or sigils for sale, and was wondering if this was done intentionally due to gold's association with the right-hand path religions, or am I just reading into this too much? I did notice you mentioned that ritual is 2/3 of the Satanic Bible and feel like it's important to try to get some clarity. All right, so to be clear about what the Satanic Bible says about gold, this is only in relation to the chalice, I'm pretty sure. So let me pick up the book and read you the direct quote. In Satanic ritual, the chalice or goblet used represents the chalice of ecstasy. Ideally, the chalice should be made of silver, but if a silver chalice cannot be obtained, one made from another metal, glass, or crockery may be used. Anything but gold. It has emphasis on that. Gold has always been associated with white light religions and the heavenly realm. So that's all the book has to say on the topic. Is this the reason why stores like Satan Me seemingly don't carry gold? Maybe. That may have a lot to do with it. I really don't know. But let's put aside the issue of ritual for a moment. As for whether it's necessarily wrong for a Satanist to wear gold otherwise, I think I speak for most Satanists when I say I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, I myself, I am married, and like a lot of married people, I wear a gold wedding ring. It's not like... So it's not like this gold thing is a religious rule akin to like kosher laws in Judaism, where, for example, Jews can't touch pork, or the laws in Hinduism that say Hindus can't eat beef. There's nothing like that about Satanism and not being able to touch gold. But let's get back to this rule specifically against gold chalices. Is something bad going to happen if you use a gold chalice in a satanic ritual? No, it's not like there's some sort of metaphysical danger here. I mean, most of you listeners have heard my rants in favor of formalized ritual. In this day and age, I'm just happy to hear whenever a Satanist, is making any effort at all to gather the tools and do their very first ritual. Whether the chalice ends up being silver, gold, or a goddamn Dixie cup. Now, I suppose one could even argue that gold has other symbols and archetypes associated with it, which one could call satanic. Gold, for example, is often associated with greed, with material wealth, with elitism. I would call those things satanic. Or even aside from the archetypes, maybe there's some entirely personal connection you, as an individual Satanist, have with gold. Like, say you're a goldsmith by trade, and you feel a connection with using a gold chalice you yourself made. I don't know, it's easy to think of examples like that. I can already hear some Satanists out there with a knee-jerk reaction of, well, yes, Bill, nobody can tell you what you can't have as a chalice. A Satanist is his or her own god. Your ritual is all about you and what's most important to you. So gold doesn't really matter. In fact, none of the directions matter. And the truly satanic thing to do would be, as a complete individual, throw it all away and do a 100% completely customized. No. I don't advocate for that extreme either, in case you couldn't tell with my change of voice. So, what is my take on all of this? My take is that as a Satanist, you, and I don't mean Jay, who is asking this question about gold, but you, as in you Satanists in general, you shouldn't be fretting too much over the ritual protocol presented in the Satanic Bible, but at the same time, there's nothing gloriously nonconformist or satanic about completely throwing it all away either. So I think this brings up another question. Why do we have ritual protocols at all in Satanism? Why is it Leviathan being called from the west and not Baphomet from the northeast? Why is it black robes and not orange hats? Why is it candles and not glow sticks? And again, to those of you out there who feel the compulsion to say, well, Satanists can do ritual with orange hats and flashlights if he really wanted to. Yeah, I get that. But if ritual were as simple as, oh, do whatever you want, well, then the pages about ritual in the Satanic Bible would maybe be like 2 pages long, if even that. So I would argue there are several reasons why we have some specifics about ritual. First of all, regardless of your views on ritual, you have to admit that having an outline is at least a starting point. And Anton LaVey confirmed this in the 1990 book Church of Satan, where he said that he wanted to present something so that Satanists could get started on this ritual thing without much difficulty. Because most other occult books out there were just putting the cart before the horse and demanding, whatever sorts of elaborate things, gather this kind of moss in midnight for 3 days in a row. And I remember I had a witchcraft book that was saying, like, take a whole entire room and scrub it down with salt water and do that. And just pretty impractical things. Whereas the tools in the Satanic Bible are pretty simple, pretty easy to substitute. So my point here is that following some kind of outline is at the very least a good way to get started, a good springboard for your own things. I mean, look at other sorts of practices and skills in life. Even if it's something involving personal expression, I would argue the best of the best start by training through other people's work or through exercises. People who've composed music, well, a lot of times they first learned by playing other people's music. Maybe they got lessons, or playing exercises like scales, or learning other people's songs by ear, or other things they didn't write themselves, but that's how it started. Or you want to be an artist, you want to learn how to draw, paint, or whatever first. Well, maybe take lessons for that, or start by drawing what you see and things you like, and then honing your craft as you go on. Well, here in the Satanic Bible is a standard ritual, which has more than enough room for customization, but also has enough structure to it so that you have grounding in something tangible you can start with. In fact, I talked a few episodes back about group ritual. If you're going to do a group ritual with fellow Satanists, it's good to know what you're going to be doing and know the standard protocol. Repeat Hail Satan when the ritual priest or priestess says Hail Satan. Repeat the infernal names. Repeat the Shem Hamfarash. No talking during the ritual aside from the spoken parts of the ritual itself, and so on. And a third reason why I would argue that we have some specifics laid out for rituals in Satanism This is another point I've mentioned in a past episode or two, and this is kind of hard to explain, but bear with me. I really think there is something to be said about the power of archetypes and traditional symbols and the Jungian psychology, you could say, that goes with that. So if you call yourself a Satanist, then you already grasp the concept of taking a symbol and identifying with that and how it can serve as a worldview and a motivation for things in your life. Now extend that to the ritual chamber. It's Satan, Satanism. Do I really have to explain why the Satanic Bible says black robes and not orange hats? Why it's black candles and not plastic glow sticks? Hopefully you get my point. And yet another reason why I feel there are specific protocols to satanic ritual. I sincerely believe that there is a power here in having structure for the sake of structure. And by power, I don't mean a supernatural power, which is what maybe some other religions believe of their own rituals and symbols. It's funny, I still see idiots who try using that as a straw man argument against Satanism or the Church of Satan. The accusation that we believe in magic, like MAGICK, in the supernatural sense. No, it doesn't work like that. Go read the explicit definition of magic given in the Satanic Bible if you don't believe me. Anyway, again, I'm not talking about a supernatural power in this specific example, but a psychological power. In fact, a psychodramatic power, really, in having structure for the sake of structure. Hard to explain, but I really believe that within a ritual context, following a set of protocol for the sake of protocol takes a certain disciplined mindset, and that in turn is something I think that goes with the territory of being singular and focused with your desires and all that, as you're supposed to be in the ritual chamber. So at the very least, if you don't have the focus and discipline to follow some simple directions or routines or outlines, then will you have it, the discipline, the will and all that to obtain whatever it is you want in life that you're kind of doing the ritual for? So to me, the question is not, why do I have to use a non-gold chalice? Because again, nobody really gives a shit at the end of the day. My question is, why would not having a gold chalice be a deal breaker for you? And again, by you, I don't mean the listener who wrote in. I mean the sort of person who would see this little detail as some kind of threat to their personal liberty and expression in the ritual chamber. I think it's really silly. It's okay. Just very simple protocol to follow. Do your ritual. And there's still more than enough room for customization. Anyway, I've been talking for a while now, but I'm going to finish with a satanic anecdote, which means it's time for a satanic dote. Cue the satanic dote theme song.
Satanic anecdotes. Satanic dotes.
Isaiah says, I really enjoyed Satansplain episode number 50. That was all about trapezoids. I have an anecdote from my own life on the topic. For our honeymoon, my wife and I had stayed for 2 nights in Manresa Castle in Port Townsend, Washington. It is purportedly haunted. By this point, I had just received my red card, and I had taken Satan Speaks with me to read during the quiet times. One thing that came up during the conversations about the hauntings is that they seem to happen most often within the top of the castle's tower. The desk clerk went so far as to suppose that there was a portal to the spirit world or something like that. However, I noted that the top cone of the tower was split such that the frustum was black and the tip was white, creating essentially a trapezoidal figure. Additionally, when you look at the front of the building between the curved tops of the windows, trapezoids can also be seen. Here is the website for reference, and the link presented here in the email is to manresacastle.com, M-A-N-R-E-S-A castle.com. All in all, I enjoyed my stay, and I enjoyed Port Townsend in general, namely for its good restaurants and spice shop. Well, that was a great example of seeing the law of the trapezoid in action. Let's end things here for today. Thank you for listening to Satansplain, and until next time, hail Satan. And Merry Christmas. You have been listening to Satansplain. For more information about the show, visit the official website at satansplain.com. And for more information about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2023, Magister Bill M.